Welcome to For the Long Run, the podcast exploring the why behind what keeps runners running long, strong, and motivated. I'm your host, Jonathan Levitt. Through personal and professional connections in the running world, I have the privilege of getting to know some amazing athletes. I've always been fascinated by the psychological aspect of running, and this podcast is aimed at exploring this and much more. I hope you enjoy. This podcast is brought to you by Access Nutrients. If you routinely consume foods made from grains, beans, nuts, seeds, or soy, you may unknowingly be ingesting large amounts of phytate, an anti-nutrient that pulls zinc, iron, calcium, and magnesium out of your body. For anyone struggling with digestion, energy, sleep, or micronutrient deficiencies like iron deficiency anemia, consider giving Access Nutrients a try. This digestive enzyme will break down the phytate in your food and give your body access to the micronutrients otherwise locked up and unavailable to you. They've already had incredible success with elite athletes struggling with iron absorption and energy. Check out some of the incredible testimonials and research on their site to learn more at accessnutrients.org and use the code FTLR for 10% off your first order. Welcome back. I have Nathan Riech joining me on the podcast today. Nathan, thanks so much for taking some time to chat.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on the podcast. I really appreciate it.
For sure. So first question is a tough one. Who is Nathan?
Oh man, that is a really tough question. I think for a long time it was a hard one to figure out. I think Nathan is just someone who really cares about the next generation, and my my relationship with running has evolved a lot over the years. And it used to be that I just loved to win, and now I think opening my eyes and seeing not everyone has 9 professional athletes in their family, and not everyone is as privileged as I am, and especially people who get paralyzed. I think that's kind of been my new mission, to help the next generation have better resources in the Paralympic scene than we have today.
That's awesome. Your Instagram bio reads 2019 world champ, 2-time world record holder, ask me about my injury, podcaster, parasport. So you've captured it all right in. I don't know how many characters that is, but right in there, and you're upfront about everything. And I think that I've spoken with a handful of people lately who have shared a similar sentiment, where it's not just about me; it's about how I move the community forward and how I can inspire others to feel a little more normal or a little more a part of something. So kudos to you for taking that approach. But has it? Well, I guess you said it hasn't always been that way. So talk to me about when it wasn't that way.
Yeah, it was right after my injury. So I got hit in the head with a golf ball in 2005, and like I said, my dad was a 2-time Olympian. He did commercials with Tiger Woods, sponsored by Nike and Powerade. My mom was the Canadian national champion in the pole vault. And so for me, it was just kind of tough finding where I fit in after that injury, because just the way I moved was just really awkward, and I stuttered really bad. I got out of the hospital on a Sunday, went to school on a Monday, and my teacher had to tie my shoes. I had to relearn how to write with my other hand, and I was bullied a lot. And I think running came to me in an interesting time, where now it isn't my identity, but at that time it certainly was.
How did you move from it being your identity to it not being your identity, but you're doing it at a competitive and Paralympic level? What was that evolution like?
Yeah, so my senior year in college, I graduated from University of South Alabama in Mobile, Alabama, and my last race at conference, I finished dead last in the final. And I remember being really frustrated and just saying that I wanted more from the sport. And as I do, my mom has always been kind of a person of reason for me. She always tells me bluntly what she thinks. And she just thought that there was this great avenue for Paralympic sport for me, and there's a classification for me. And she knows how much I love public speaking and just working with younger kids, just because I am an older brother older brother to four younger siblings, and so she just knew that passion was there. And then I moved to Victoria and got around this amazing team of physiologists, sports medicine, amazing coaches. And then I started working with a sports psychologist, and we just kind of started creating who Nate was. And I ended up creating this thing called the Gray Wolf mentality. And Gray Wolf is my middle name. It was given from a elder in my tribe, which is on the Flathead River in Montana. And so, we just kind of dove into that and really tried to learn what meant a lot to me. I think for a lot of times after getting injured, I would get offended when people didn't work hard. And I think at times I was a bad teammate. And so just really trying to navigate that and just being upfront of who I want to be and not who my mom wants to be, not who I wish I was, but actually who I am.
Was that process hard for you though?
Yeah. It was really hard. It was, there's definitely, I'm someone who doesn't cry a lot, but when I cry, oh boy, do I cry. So bottled it up a lot. And I think for me, I've always found refuge in moving new places where I don't really know anyone and just kind of starting from scratch and, but also keeping those people in mind who have, my support team who have got me to where I am today. And I think my injury had always been a difficult one for me because it's in my brain. So a lot of people are like, oh, you're able-bodied or oh, this and that. But there is definitely an internal battle I had to fight. But at the same time, my injury doesn't define me. And I never want someone to look at me and say, oh, poor Nate, or that's just not who I am. It's just I have faced a lot of hurdles in my life, but there's people who have faced more hurdles. And so I just try to take it with that mentality. And I just love difficult things. I love when adversity hits. And I'm sure, as you know, in the moment, it's not always the most clear. But it is clear over time. And in hindsight is always 2020.
For sure. So talk to me about the evolution of your running. When did you go for your first run? Let's sort of set the stage there.
Yeah, so before I got injured, I actually was a sprinter because my dad ran like 10.4 in high school in the 100. So he was a sprinter, and I remember that. But after I got injured, therapy became running actually for me. I joined this running club that we had at my local elementary school in Chandler, Arizona. And that was really when I went for my first run. And actually, it was funny. My first run, I was very angry because I got cut from the basketball team. And I still believe that the basketball coach and the running coach were really good friends. And I think I was good enough to make the team, but they both knew that my future was in running because I couldn't use my right arm. So it's pretty easy to defend me. And so, that's really where it first was. And it really was, I really allowed it to, I ran with a lot of pain at the beginning. It was my outlet, and I wasn't aware at that time that it was my outlet.
Got it. And so fast forward to today. Have you run yet today?
I have, yeah. Had an easy 40-minute run this morning.
Why did you get out of the door and go for that run?
Like I said, I really, my why is bigger than myself. It's the Paralympic movement. And I know I'm never going to be bigger than that, but also, when you believe in something bigger than yourself, it almost like, if you don't feel like running, I just think about the next generation of athletes. And it's always like, do you not want to help the next generation of athletes? And that seems to get me out of the door very quick.
Yeah, I think I completely agree. I think the bigger than yourself approach is powerful. We've seen it time and time again in major marathons. I think the most notable example is Shalane Flanagan and Des Linden at Boston a couple of years ago. And Des was just going along to help Shalane, and she ended up winning in pretty adverse conditions. And I think that the brain and the psychological aspect of sharpening your mind in that way can really unlock another level. So talk to me about, it sounded like you've worked with some sports psychologists or therapists in some capacity. So talk to me about how you got to that point where you're able to run for more than just yourself, because I don't think you can, just get out of bed and decide, oh, I'm part of this movement and I want to inspire others. I think there's something more that has to sort of grow, and it's a maturity, I'd say, that people aren't born with, unless you disagree. But yeah, talk to me about that. How does that sit with you?
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't deserve really any credit for this. I think, firstly, it's my mother. She used to always tell me, no matter what's going on in your life, you don't bring it to the track. You focus on your task at hand during that day. And so, yeah, she, like, when my stepdad had cancer, and my stepdad's my best friend, and that was a really tough time. But during that time, I had some of my best racing, just because my mom taught me that that was kind of my refuge, and that I just really needed to focus on really executing my race plan during practice, or just really paying attention to those little details. And then also, like you said, running has become more of a meditative state for me, which is funny looking back, because I would have never said that in college. I didn't even believe in sports psychology in college. I thought it was the dumbest thing, really, personally. And until I really asked my parents and family, and almost everyone said that that was one of the one things they wish they used more. And so, yeah, just really diving into that. And I just feel like if you don't have a minute for yourself, or 5 minutes for yourself every day, then you really don't have a life, because it's just, you can be pretty stress free, but there's no actual time where you're fully stress free. There's just things moving in and out of your life. And so, yeah, I think those are the two individuals that have really helped me with that.
That's awesome. So you've talked about sort of the benefits of being in a family that has such rich athletic backgrounds. Was it ever sort of I don't want to say a detriment, but was there ever pressure or an emphasis on sport in a way that you didn't appreciate?
No, not for me personally. I definitely saw it with some of my friends, but I mean, I guess it's a theme. My mom was just so good at giving me exactly what I needed at the time. She was always someone that asked a lot of questions, and so I feel like she was almost quizzing me to see how hard she could actually push me. But I think we have such a unique relationship when you almost see your son die. I think that's a very unique relationship, and going to therapy, PT, multiple times a week, and her being there for me so much. I don't think it ever really got hard. I think I maybe got lost possibly at times, because, you look every direction and there's a bunch of professional athletes in my family, and I knew I wanted to be a professional athlete. I just didn't know where or when that avenue would open up for me. And I had faith it would open up, but there was definitely some times where my journey seemed very blurry.
What were some of the lessons or some of the hurdles you said when it was blurry?
Yeah, I just think I've always been the hardest person on myself. That's just kind of always how it's been. But I've really learned to have a really more relaxed approach to training. I used to be so laser focused, just so focused on all the little things, and having to go to bed at 9 p.m. every night. And then I think I really learned to loosen the reins. And anyone who knows me, I'm pretty to myself, but I also have a boisterous personality too. So I definitely enjoy the time at night where I meditate and do that stuff. But I also do love being crazy and joking around. And so I think learning to have fun at practice, and finding a coach that allows me to have fun, but also can rein rein me in at times. And it's kind of similar to how Craig Ingles is. I mean, I've gotten to train with him just 1 or 2 times in St. Moritz, Switzerland, and just seeing, as well as Sam Parsons, just seeing kind of being a fly in the wall and seeing how they really focus on training, but also have so much fun. I think was pretty eye opening for me, because I think that was my detriment for almost my entire career. Was I was just too focused, and I would squeeze all the juice out, and I just wouldn't be having fun towards the end of the season.
Yeah, Sam and the Tin Man guys seem to be having more fun than anybody else. I think that the play piece is so important. I did a podcast with Aisha Pratt-Lear, another boulder athlete, and she talked about, she's 30 years old, and she said, I wouldn't be in this sport still if I didn't think, if I weren't having fun all the time. I think that hearing that from a professional athlete or an Olympic or Paralympic athlete is important for amateurs to hear, because I think some of us take things too seriously, myself included sometimes. And this reminder that it is fun, even when it's your job, it's supposed to be fun. I think it's very useful to hear. And there's the time for fun, and then there's the time to get to work, and sometimes it's a fine line. But I think it's an important line, and you definitely need to be on both sides of it at times.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think mixing it up is so important too, because, like just different runs, it just training can get so monotonous. And a lot of the times we do a lot of the same training. So it's really important to, maybe drive an extra 15 minutes to go do a run that you've never done. And instead of focusing on your breathing or how hard the run feels, you're just so amazed by nature and just the things around you. And I think that's one thing that Sam Parsons really taught me, was to really enjoy each run for what it's worth, and don't be afraid to, enjoy it.
For sure. Switching gears a little bit, let's talk Tokyo. How has your approach to training shifted in 2020 and going into 2021?
Yeah, so with the Paralympics, it's a little bit different than the Olympics in the sense that I'm basically almost qualified. I basically only have to show fitness at the nationals, so I'm really just focused on Tokyo. And so I've taken a really, really long-term approach and just told my coach, let's really work on my weaknesses, because my aerobic side is definitely my weakness. There is no ifs and buts about that. And so a lot of threshold work, which I will admit is not my favorite. I've definitely enjoyed it more recently. I think part of that meditation, I think that's where that comes from. But yeah, just really focusing on that. And I think just not forgetting the little things, and doing little training camps, even if it's just down island. I feel like when you change location, it just allows you to look at the things that might be missed if you're just going to your house day in and day out.
Yeah, I think, switching it up is so important. You've alluded to gratitude and mindfulness a handful of times. Talk to me more about that. Is that a more intentional practice, or is it something that has sort of been second nature to you?
No, it's definitely something I had to work on. That's for sure. I think sometimes you just get so much into your life that you sometimes forget to be grateful for things. And so, that's one practice that I really try to do. Like in the morning, I'll do a body scan while I meditate, and then as well, really think of things that I'm grateful for, because at the end of the day, like I've had so many people help me get to where I am. And I think with the mindfulness piece, I found that I'm just someone who loves the race, and I'm at like a 10 out of 10 day of race day. I'm just like super psyched, and we just found that I execute my race plans if I'm more at like a 4 out of 10. And so there's definitely a lot of meditation that comes along with that. And so definitely on race day, I am, when I won my world title in 2019, I was the most relaxed I've ever been in my life for a race, which is really weird. I'm a horrible dancer, but I was dancing before about to go in the pen, and it was my coach and I were just laughing, and she just looked at me. I was like, "You are ready to go," and I just felt so relaxed. And I think.
So how did you get to that place?
It was interesting how I got to that place. I was almost surprised because I had broken up with my girlfriend at the time, and she was also a Paralympic athlete for Team Canada. So it was kind of a interesting time, for all that to happen. But I really just each day took time out and, really looked back at my training as well to see how I got to this place. And at the end of the day, I was like, well, if I'm not ready now, then I'm never going to be ready. So let's just go and have some fun. And I think, I had some really good, like my siblings are, other than the Paralympic movement, they're the most important, thing to me and reason why, I get out of bed as well. Every day, because if I telling them to go chase their dreams and I'm not doing the same, then I'm just talking crap. And so, I think that's also, knowing that they were going to be watching me and it was going to be televised was kind of a cool moment for me.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think those races when you're on the start line or on the blocks or whatever it might be, and you're at peace and you're happy and present. That's when the magic happens.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think Ryan Hall talks about running free quite a bit. And that day I just felt like there was nothing holding me back. I felt like every move I made was just so free. And I actually almost fell on my face at 700 meters. One of the Algerian in the race who ended up finishing second tripped me, clipped me, and it almost looked like it was kind of on purpose. And I had the fastest C time going in. And so I was like, listen, I was going to wait to the last 200 meters to go. And with like 800 meters left, I was like, nah, we're like, let's see who's really in the best shape. And so I kind of just took off, and there's a funny moment where I look back at him, while like right after he tripped me, and everyone's like, "What'd you say?" I was like, "I don't think you want to know what I said." But yeah, that's a fun moment to think back on.
That's awesome. Yeah, these moments where you just feel, as you said, running free. Or I remember a 5K I did a couple of years ago, and I hadn't raced in a long time, and due to injury, and I was standing on the start line, and I was like feeling like an uncaged animal, and I was just like, let me go. I came in second in that race, and it was one of the best executed races I've ever run, and it was just like pure emotion, and it was like a celebration of being able to race again, and that feeling is so powerful.
Yeah, no, that feeling is very powerful. We had a time trial, and I ran a 3K, and I ended up having like a 9-second PB off of just like not a lot of intense training, a lot of just endurance training. And my coach was like, she's like, it just looked like you were taking, the only answer was yes today. The only answer is I'm going to PB. And I was like, yeah, I was pretty angry most of the time. But yeah, that was a fun race.
Nice. If you know me, you know that I always do my own research and also try everything out before sharing it with you. I've been using Access Nutrients for a while now, and while I can't pin all of my strong workouts and long runs to a single thing, I have been feeling very strong lately and definitely getting what I need out of my food, at least according to my blood work. Check out accessnutrients.org to learn more about their product and research, and use the code FTLR for 10% off your first order. And now back to our conversation. Switching gears a little bit again. So you are a podcaster as well. Talk to me about that.
Yeah, I am. I think my stutter for a long time had been something I was self-conscious of, just because I got made fun of and bullied kind of right after my injury happened. And so I'd wanted to do it for a long time, and I just really enjoy talking to people and just having a good conversation, because I love to learn. And That's why, a lot of times I'll ask to come on podcasts, because a lot of times I learn stuff about training or about life from the interviews, or getting interviewed, or interviewing people. And so, I just try to interview Paralympic and Olympic athletes, and I really like to just tell their backstory, because I feel like where you come from is so important to your story. And so I really try to tell that backstory, and then also have some fun too. I think sometimes track can be so serious. And so I like to poke a little fun and joke around, and ask some fun questions as well.
What are some of the storylines or themes or takeaways that you've enjoyed from your own podcast?
I think adversity has always been something I've been super intrigued with, personally, just because going through my own adversity, and just my brain injury is the best thing to ever happen to me. And so I've always been intrigued if that was other people's takeaways from an injury, or death in the family, or just something that happens that is really tough pill to swallow. And so that was one thing always been super intrigued with. And just there's so many different ways to get to the top. There's so many different, like Mo Farah trains way different than maybe I'm trying to think who, like Donovan Brazier, right? There's so many different ways. And it's really interesting. Like Nick Simmons and Donovan Brazier, they're completely different athletes, but they had pretty similar PBs. And so I think I've always been interested just hearing how different athletes get to that end result.
Yeah, definitely. That was a similar reason for starting this podcast. I was having conversations with people about their why and, what allows them to be successful. And, there are many ways to skin the cat. And, there are so many different paths that lead to progress, and understanding how to pull some nuggets from everyone's story and share it has been fascinating.
Yeah,
and personally very helpful.
Yeah, I know. I feel so selfish sometimes when I interview these people, because I'm getting so much insight, information, that like I interviewed Aaron Brown, who's one of the best 200-meter runners in the world, and man, can he run a curve. And so just super interesting hearing his thought process, and he's become a pretty good friend of mine, and he's always there if I have a question, and obviously he's experienced so much, and so it's just really cool. I think I decided to interview a lot of my teammates as well, and it's just crazy how well I didn't know my teammates. Like I know them on the track, but it was really cool to like actually hear what makes them tick and what gets them excited.
Yeah, once you can figure out what motivates someone, I think it changes the dynamic entirely.
Yeah, no, for sure. One of my first interview was my buddy Tom Normando, and we've traveled the world together. And there was like so many things I didn't know about him. I was like, dude, how have we not talked about this? Like, I feel like the worst friend. Like, what is going on? So it was, it's been, I think almost a bridge to some friendships I never thought I would have, and just strengthening some friendships that I already had, which was really cool.
Definitely. Yeah. It's funny that like sometimes, and it's the same thing with some of my friends who I've had on the podcast. It's like we have these friends who we don't really talk in depth with, and we, maybe it's more surface level, but then you get on a podcast that thousands of people are going to listen to, and you do get more in depth, and you do talk about real stuff. And it's funny how that dynamic works.
Yeah, no, and it's really cool. I think Tom and I always just talk about how much pain we're in after a session, and we never really talked about, like how his injury happened, or like how he had it from birth, and just how he navigated being a soccer player and not really running track until his senior year. And so that was really cool to just hear his journey, and me not knowing that. So that was really, really cool.
What are some of the other fun takeaways you've had from your own podcasting in terms of lessons learned or stories that you've heard or whatnot?
Yeah, I think loosening the reins really, I thought I understood it, and then some people talked about it, and I was like, wow, like like you're really successful and you do have fun. And I think it's really interesting. You might believe something or think something, but when someone says it, it just hits different. It just, someone said maybe a wording different, or said it in a different way that you're like, dang, yeah. And you almost get chills. And there's a lot of those moments where talking about like just people's practices during training, how scheduled they are, or how not scheduled they are, which is super interesting. I think my all-time favorite one is I interviewed my cousin, Georgianne Moline, who's a 400-meter hurdler for Team US. And just like really hearing the struggles she went through. And I think sometimes you see people who are at the top of their game and you think they don't struggle, but Georgianne's had some really, really tough moments, and she's always been someone who really inspires me. So it was really cool to kind of hear her side of it and really hear how much at times she struggled.
Yeah, the public struggle is interesting. So many times we hear about a struggle that's followed by a success story, and I think hearing a struggle in the moment is a totally different, and I don't want to say refreshing, but I think it's a necessary story to tell.
Yeah, I think it's super interesting because, I struggled a lot when I first came into the Paralympic scene because, let's be honest, like I was okay in a small conference, would have never made like SECs or ACCs, just never was that good. And then all of a sudden on Canada Day, I set the world record and I'm in the newspaper and I'm getting interviews and I'm like, whoa, like this is different. I stutter. I wasn't enjoying interviews at first. I just felt like all of a sudden someone just turned the bright lights on and there I was. And it was, super interesting. And we flew straight from that race to nationals. So then that's where kind of all the Canadian media was. And so, yeah, I remember myself struggling. So it was cool to hear someone who I love and care about talking about her struggles and letting me know that like I'm not, the only one going through it. I think at times, sometimes we, our mind thinks we're the only one going through it when honestly everyone goes through it.
For sure. What's a time where you experienced what might be regarded as a failure, but it was really a learning opportunity in disguise?
Yeah, I think finishing last place in that final my senior year of college. So to give you a bit of the backstory, so I actually fainted after one of my races because I didn't have enough food in my system, and I bounced my head off the sidewalk. And obviously, with my past history with getting struck in the head by a golf ball and having a traumatic brain injury, we had to be ultra cautious. And that came my first race of outdoors, had like a season best, almost PB'd, and then that happened. And just really learning that I think sometimes success isn't linear, and it's so windy and sometimes dark and sometimes bright. And so I think that lesson, I was old enough to really get that lesson. And it, sometimes those lessons don't come from a year or two. Sometimes, you're sitting in bed or you're journaling and you're like, oh man, that was a really tough moment, but man, I'm really happy that happened.
Yeah, the way that you put that is fascinating. So I spent 4 years trying to qualify for the Boston Marathon, and I failed 4 times trying to run sub 3 in the marathon. And somebody asked me on the podcast recently if I considered those marathons failures when I didn't do it. And I ran 4:01 as in a race I was trying to break 3. And in the moment, I think I would have called those all failures because I didn't learn from them at the time. But collectively, looking back, I needed those, and I needed the ass kicking in the way that what I was doing wasn't working, and it needed to be so extreme that like it took 4 years, and finally I was able to get to a place where my mental approach to it shifted completely. And I think, as you said, sometimes you're just sitting in bed and it's like, that was needed, that was necessary, and that was a lesson. So I love how you put that there.
Yeah, I think so many people just see failure as like this horrible thing. But I mean, a small failure, we're all going to have it. I mean, at the end of the day, you're not, you might have failed, but you're not a failure. And
Right.
so I think that's just something that, I mean, it took me a while to realize that. I mean, I'm not going to pretend like it didn't. But yeah, it's interesting, the different ways to approach that. And I just don't see, if I failed, like, I don't really spend a long time on that. I'm like, well, I failed and I failed a million times. So I don't really know, what I should be worried about. And I think Kobe Bryant is a huge, person that I always looked up to. My uncle was his physiotherapist for the last couple years in the league, and he's actually in his documentary. And so he's someone I always ask my uncle about stories and actually how crazy he was about waking up at 3 a.m. And so it was really cool to kind of hear those stories from him.
That's awesome. Yeah, one of the other things you said that's along those lines is that progress isn't linear. We hear this all the time. But the piece about failure being necessary or not, failing doesn't mean you're a failure, but I think failure is critical to success. And if progress were to be linear, you think it would be boring?
Yeah, probably. It'd probably be fun at the beginning because you're like, dang, I'm
Right.
just getting better and better. But yeah, I think that's it's an interesting way to put it. I mean, yeah, like my journey has been so zigzagged, and so I mean, I not PB'd for 3 or 4 years, and I showed up every day having fun, going to practice, and it's funny. I always thought sport, to use another Kobe Bryant quote, is the greatest metaphor for life. And I think it teaches you so many lessons that you can't, or that you at least don't want to learn in the business world. Or like, if you fail a million times in work, they're probably going to fire you.
Right.
But if you fail a bunch of time in running, hey, the next day you get
It's
to
a
go
good
for a
thing. Yeah,
run,
you're shooting your
right?
shot. Yeah.
Yeah, so I just think that's why I'm so passionate about Paralympic sport and just youth sport in general. Like, if we take away sport from a kid who's in a wheelchair, or a kid who got paralyzed, or they just move different or act different, then I just think that's so wrong. And so that's why I'm a big proponent, because my mom fought for me. They didn't think I should ever graduate high school. They said there was no way I would graduate college, and no way I would ever play competitive sports ever again, or ever, and never walk without a limp. And I've done all of those. And so not everyone, unfortunately, has that person who fights for them, like that. And so I think it's important to have, uh, put a person in their life, like a coach or a mentor, that will fight for them like that, and that will teach them how to self advocate for themselves.
Yeah, I love that. And it's back to it's more than just about yourself. It's, you want somebody who, or you want to be that person that you might have needed in your life a couple of years ago, right?
Yeah, I think there's so many people. Like, when I was in the hospital, this thing is something that's always stuck with me. I was in the hospital at Phoenix Children's Hospital, and obviously that's where the spring training is in Phoenix. And a lot of the pitchers who were recovering from Tommy John surgery would come play video games with me. And at that time, it was 2005. Diamondbacks won the World Series in 2001. And so I was baseball crazy. My stepdad played professional baseball and went to the College World Series while he was at Southern Cal. And so those people really, really helped me recover ultimately. And so even if I'm that person to one kid, I'm good with that. That's 100% what I'm trying to do. I don't need it. I don't need to be that for 1,000 people. For 1,000 kids, I just want to be it for one person.
That's awesome. There's a saying in the Jewish tradition where if you help one person, it's actually, if you save one person, you save a world entire. So it's like, even if it's just one person, that's one whole world that you're helping.
Yeah, and then that person affects someone else, so it's like a chain of
Exactly.
reaction too, right? So I think that's super important, and just to understand. There's so many things that I'm so fortunate that my brain injury taught me so early. I mean, there's not it's a good thing that many people don't have to fight for their life, before they're 10, but I'm still so thankful for that.
So I read an article about you, and it said that this is a quote from you. It said, "The doctor told me that you'll never walk without a limp. You'll never play competitive sports ever again, and that just sent a tingling sensation through my entire body, and it sends one through my body now just talking about it. I made it my mission to prove him wrong." So you're 10 years old. You hear that. What do you do next?
I remember my mom being in that meeting as well, and I remember her just looking at me. And in my head, I'm not gonna lie, there's a lot of cuss words that went through my head in that moment. And I just remember thinking, like, you don't know me, you don't know who I am, and you don't know what I've gone through. And yeah, it's interesting because I do give him some credit for challenging me, because I'm definitely one for a challenge, that's for sure. And so, yeah, I'm thankful he said that. And also, I just don't know if you should tell a kid that to his face at that young of an age. But at the end of the day, like I always talk about, there's just two roads you go down. There's either this well-lit road that's smooth, no failure, but no high, like no extreme highs. And then there's this other road that's windy where there's a lot of failure, but those failures make you realize how important those highs are and how cool it is to be on top. And you're on top doesn't need to be number one in the world, or can just be a PB. And so I think having those tough moments always allows you to enjoy and highlight those ups.
Yeah, I think the lows definitely make the highs even higher. And as we were talking about, I think it'd be boring without them. Again, switching gears a little bit, let's fast forward 5 to 10 years. What are you really proud of?
The thing I've always been the most proud of, which is this isn't track related, so if you want me to give you a track one too, it's fine. But just being an older brother to my 4 siblings, that's always been so important to me. I love how different their personalities are, and I just always try and tell them, like, I don't care if you play sports, which they're all very good athletes, but I just want you to do something you're passionate about, and I would want my legacy to be that more than anything. Obviously, I want to push the Paralympic movement forward, but I would rather not be known for that. Like, I would rather that just happen and me possibly be just a 0.1% in that. But for being known, I would like to be known as someone who is a great brother.
It's always interesting how people answer that question. So you said something that was, completely separate from what you do at a competitive level, and there was no tangible action from it, or there's no tangible, like, I want that, I will be proud of this having happened. And that seems to be consistent across like 90% of people who are competitive athletes who I ask that question to. And I think that it says a lot about the person and their character, that it's not just, if you're in the sport to run XYZ time, or, stand out at the top of the podium, what happens when you do that, right? Then what? I think the people that make it more, as you've said, make it more than about just themselves, and they're about the process and the journey versus a specific outcome. Those are the people who are going to win, and winning isn't a tangible thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's so crazy how many amazing friends I've made because I run. I mean, it's crazy. Some guys that will just, laugh and talk. And I mean, I went to Furman for my first 2 years of college. And I mean, Aaron Templeton's on the Team Elite. I got the room with Josh Brickle in high school. He was top 8 at Foot Locker. We never talk about running, rarely. I mean, we're just laughing at each other. And so it's really cool to, see my friends do big things in running, but it's always my favorite thing is to go catch up with them for a run and just hear how life's going.
For sure. What do you wish people knew about you?
That's a good question. I feel like I'm pretty open. I feel like how much feel like how much family means to me. I think that's I try to say that, but a lot of times on podcasts or interviews, we're talking about strictly sport. I think just really understanding how much my family means to me and how much they impacted me. I think I said a quote that my inner circle deserves 99% of the credit and I deserve 1% of the credit. And that wasn't me being emotional. That was just me telling the truth and how I feel.
Yeah, I think we're all a product of our community. I did a podcast with a woman who said she's a product of her community in Harlem, New York. And thinking more about it, it's like that's true. And everybody is a product of the people that are closest to them. So I think it's an important reminder to make sure you surround yourself with good people.
Yeah, I mean, a funny story is as you talk about environment and culture. I mean, I remember finally realizing that it wasn't normal to have your family wake up at 5 a.m., throw the workout garage up, and be doing wind sprints down the street. When I finally realized that that's just not what everybody does, I was like, oh, I guess my parents did not have to actually tell me to work hard. They actually showed me this is what hard work. And I just remember like learning that, like, really, your parents don't do that? Are you serious? Like being so confused. It was pretty funny.
Awesome. Yeah, it's the perspective is everything. I think my last question is one that I like to talk about a lot and see the perspective of athletes at different levels. How do you feel about balance? And do you feel that it's overrated? Is it necessary? What's your take?
I feel like balance is needed, personally, but at times it's tough to be balanced. I feel like when it's time for a championship, like I'm pretty dang focused. But I feel like because I'm so dang focused, then after that championships, I get 2 or 3 weeks off, right? And then the balance swings completely the other way. I'm someone who loves taking time off. I'm not someone who only can take 5 days off with running and I'm dying. Funny enough, I love to play golf. And so yeah, there's things I look forward to outside of running. So I think that's important. I think, in the season, I've definitely learned to have more balance off the track. Now that I'm doing my podcast and I just kind of, enjoy making content. So I think that's really important, to learn, because I do feel like you can get burned out pretty easy if you're just all the time focused on running. And especially if you don't have why you're running. If you're just running to run and you don't understand why you love it, I think that's a hard thing to manage personally. There might be people out there who don't feel that way, but that's definitely how I feel.
I think for sustainability, I think it's necessary.
Yeah. And I'm not someone who wants to light the world on fire for 2 or 3 years, run fast, and then be out. Like I definitely, I want to go into ultra marathoning or marathoning, ultra marathoning after I'm done running. And I'm pretty sure my girlfriend's sitting in the room. I'm pretty sure she just rolled her eyes at me. But yeah, no, I'm someone who loves to test myself mentally. And so that's what running's given me. And I think that's one thing that's nice about running. You can make running as hard or as easy as you want to make it.
Definitely. Well, I think I lied. I do have one more question now. You talk about you love a good mental challenge. Ultras will serve that up in spades. What is it about ultras, or what do you have your eye on, and what excites you about that?
Yeah. It's the Cowboys, the guys in Flagstaff. I can't remember.
Yes, in Flagstaff. Yeah.
Yeah.
The Coco Nino Cowboys.
Yeah, correct. And so we go to Flagstaff a lot, and I watched a lot of their interviews, and I just really think they're pretty badass, to be fully honest with you. And I've always just loved testing my limits. I think that almost became an addiction right after I got hurt, because the doctor's saying that I can't do this. And I'm like, funny enough, like the reason why it shows running is because it's kind of like a middle finger to them, being like, this is the one thing you told me I couldn't walk. And so I'm going to run, and I'm going to try and win a Paralympic medal and show you. That's just always kind of how I've been. And so I just see that as the next progression, marathoning and then ultra marathoning. And I don't know. My dad was an Olympic javelin thrower. My mom was a hurdler. So I don't know if I necessarily have that marathon body. And so I don't necessarily think I'll be super elite. I'll try. It definitely won't be because of lack of effort. But yeah, it's just something that I really am looking forward to. And I'm not someone who can just go out and kind of quote unquote, like for a marathon, like jog and just smile and have fun. Like I will have fun, but I want to compete. That's definitely deeply ingrained in me.
I think you will love the 100-mile distance.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Awesome. Well, Nate, thanks so much for taking some time to chat today, and maybe see you out in Flagstaff at some point in the future, or on a mountain or track or road somewhere. But excited to follow along with your journey and see where it takes you.
Thank you so much. Yes, I hope our paths cross sometime in the future, and have fun in Colorado.
Thank you. All right. Bye. That's it for today's episode. Like many long runs, it's sad when it has to end. I hope you join in next week on For the Long Run. And in the meantime, happy trails. If you've enjoyed this episode, it would mean a lot to me if you shared it so that others can find it and enjoy it too.